Guruji, how are you? Oh, I'm doing well. By the way, I have to say, you look just like my wife, who I murdered. I mean married. Oh, that's good to hear, Guruji. By the way, I had a question. Was Shiva an alien? What makes you say that? Well, he had blue skin and had a weird serpent around his neck. Oh, don't worry. It's very common in India. I have many cousins in India who look just like that. There's nothing weird about it. All you have to do is get bitten by a snake, and your skin turns blue. Amazing, isn't it? Wow, that's amazing. I wish more Bollywood stars would turn themselves blue instead of turning white. By the way, Guru, I had a question. Is there a God? What is God? If you spin the words, it becomes dog, isn't it? In India, we have many gods. It's a true democracy. If you start worshipping a tree, no one is going to bat an eye. In India, you make your own gods. You can worship whoever you like, which is why I worship our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi's farts. And I have to say, they smell incredible. Wow, Guruji, so in India, you can worship whoever you like? Yes, like I said, it's a true democracy. You can worship any god you like, unless you're a Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Dalit, Jain, or a Sikh, of course. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Islamic Defense Podcast. So, for a long time, a lot of people have been asking me to make a video on Sadhguru. And in case you guys don't know, Sadhguru is basically the Jordan Peterson of India. It may sound weird, but yes, Indians do have a Jordan Peterson. And he's an agnostic guru. He basically teaches people yoga and makes very vague and bad philosophical arguments against God. So yeah, let's take a look at his arguments and let's see what he has to say against God and religion.
Pennsylvania, there was a man in Pennsylvania. Once there was a big flood and the flood was beginning to happen, the water was filling up and there was a very enthusiastic young journalist who was reporting stage by stage, hour by hour as to how the flood is progressing, you know. So he filed a report very eloquently. He said, as God sits and watches, the water is filling up in this part of Pennsylvania and houses are going down and this and that, and described it in very eloquent terms. Then he immediately got a response from his editor, leave the flood, interview God. God is sitting and watching. He thought he's somewhere here and forget about the flood, interview God.
He's basically using a form of argument from the problem of evil. Now, the problem with this is that in Islam or even Hinduism, this argument doesn't work. Problem of evil is only a problem, especially in Christianity, because they believe that God is only loving, or at least mostly loving. However, in Islam, we don't believe that God is only loving. We believe that God has many different attributes. We believe that God has 99 names. And we believe that God can be angry. One of the names of God in Islam is Al-Mumit, which means the destroyer or the bringer of death. In the Quran, verse 3:156, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says,
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تكونوا كالذين كفروا وقالوا لإخوانهم وقالوا لإخوانهم إذا ضربوا في الأرض أو كانوا غزا لو كانوا عندنا ما ماتوا وما قتلوا ليجعل الله ذلك حسرة في قلوبهم والله يحيي ويميت والله بما تعملون بصير.
O you who have believed, do not be like those who disbelieved and said about their brothers when they traveled through the land or went out to fight, if they had been with us, they would not have died or have been killed. So Allah makes that misconception a regret within their hearts. And it is Allah who gives life and causes death, and Allah is seeing of what you do.
And it is Allah who gives life and causes death, and Allah is seeing of what you do. So, just the same way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives life to people, He can also take it away. Because it is His right, since He's the one who gave life. So the concept of evil doesn't really apply here, since life never really belonged to the people in the first place. Especially since these people will be resurrected in the afterlife anyway. What I find interesting is that here in this story, the reporter's boss is saying to interview God, which I find really funny because, I mean, why didn't you say that before there was a flood? You know what I mean? This shows the absolute hypocrisy of the atheist agnostic narrative. And this is also a huge flaw in the so-called problem of evil arguments. So, when there is no flood, you don't care about God. However, whenever there is a flood, all of a sudden you want to interview God. It's all God's fault. So this is really funny. So whenever something good happens, like you get foods, it's your accomplishment. However, whenever something bad happens, like a flood, then all of a sudden it's God's fault. So in philosophy, this is known as the self-serving bias. So in case you guys don't know, whenever this type of bias is very common, so it happens when something good happens, like when someone says that whenever something good happens, it happened because of me, and whenever something bad happens, it happened because of someone else. Whenever something bad happens, it's always someone else's fault. So you only take credit for the good things, but not the bad things. Now, in order for problem of evil to work, you have to only focus on the bad things that happen. However, you have to completely ignore the good things that happen. And this is a major flaw in the problem of evil arguments. Because in the world, it's not that only bad things happen, good things also happen. Although, to be fair, in 2020, that's kind of rare. But, have this boss of the newspaper considered that maybe the town that was being flooded because maybe this town was run by evil people. Maybe the townspeople were evil. Maybe they were racist. Maybe they were run by violent drug gangs. And maybe by getting rid of them, God is doing everyone a favor. Or what about the fact that in religion, we believe in the afterlife? Some of these people may go to heaven based on their actions, which is far better than the material world. Also, in Islam, we believe that no one will go to hell until they have heard the message of Islam and rejected it. We believe some of these people will be tested again, and if they succeed, they might end up in heaven. So either way, however you look at it, this argument doesn't work. Either way, let's carry on.
Prayer means you're telling God what to do. You think you're God's consultant. Meditation means you have understood your limitations. Now you just shut up. If you just shut up on all levels, everything that needs to happen to you will happen to you.
Okay, so according to Sadhguru, if there is a flood, instead of praying, you should shut up and just meditate and let everyone drown. So this is the kind of logic he's operating with. Let's break down his argument, and let's steelman his argument, and let's see what we get. Premise 1. When you pray, you ask God to do something. Premise 2. Asking God to do something is foolish. Conclusion. Therefore, you should stop praying and meditate. Now, remember what I said about sound arguments? All your premises need to be true in order for your argument to be sound. Now, if you notice carefully, his first premise is completely false. Prayer does not mean you are telling God what to do. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, prayer means to make a request in a humble manner, or to address God or a God with adoration, confession, supplication, or thanksgiving. Now, does any of that sound like you're telling God what to do? No. So, prayer basically means you're making a request to God. That's what prayer means. Prayer doesn't mean you're telling God what to do. There's a huge difference between requesting something from someone and telling someone to do something. Now, tell me, which is the better scenario? You have a flood that's taking place and there's nothing you can do. Either you can pray and hope that God can help these people by stopping the flood or sending some of these people to heaven, or you can meditate and listen to these people drowning while you do absolutely nothing. Now tell me, if you're a moral person, which would you prefer? Would you prefer for these people to be saved, or would you prefer to meditate and do nothing? Because that's what it implies. I think the answer is obvious. Even if there is 1% chance your prayer might work, that is the moral thing to do. However, if you choose to meditate ignoring those people, then you are absolutely an evil person. Because you won't even consider the possibility that God might consider your request. Also, if you don't believe in a God, then well, that's even worse. You're meditating to make yourself feel better rather than actually doing something for the victims of the flood. This shows the true selfish nature of the agnostic or atheist person. Also, Sadhguru is using a really bad analogy. He is committing the false analogy fallacy. He is using the story of a man surviving a flood and then get rich by telling his story. However, he gets ashamed when he is asked to share his story with Noah. Yes, sure, he is ashamed to tell Noah, but what the hell does that have anything to do with telling God what to do? Nothing. And it doesn't establish the point he's trying to make. Either way, let's continue.
Gautama, the Buddha, you heard of him?
Yes.
Everybody heard of Gautama? Yes. So, Buddha is not his name. His name is Gautama Siddhartha. He became a Buddha. So he is not the only Buddha in the world. There have been thousands of them, and there still are. So Gautama was sitting in a large congregation of people one morning, an early morning, earlier than this, okay? A man arrived and stood there in the shadows. This man is a great devotee. He's a devotee of Ram, but this man invested his whole life in God. Total. Age is passing away. Little doubt has come. He knows there is God. Just a little doubt. Suppose there is no God. I'm wasting my whole life doing Ram, Ram, Ram. Now there is an enlightened being here. He wants to confirm. But after being a well-known devotee for a long time, because he did not just go to the temple, he built many temples. At this stage in his life, how to ask whether there is God or not now? So he came early morning, stood in the shadows there and asked this inevitable question, is there God? Gautama looked at the man and gave a clear, emphatic no. Here this large congregation of disciples, this has always been a struggle in their mind, is there God or no God, is there God or no God? Oof, one big relief. When the evening once again the congregation is sitting, another man came. He also standing in the shadows. This man is a Charvaka. Charvaka means, in India, there are groups of people who are known as Charvakas. These Charvakas are out and out materialists. They don't believe anything other than what they can see. Age is passing. Little doubt has come. Suppose there is God. When I go there, will he leave me? And all these believers say that he's got all kinds of torture equipment up there. So because I went about proving to everybody that he doesn't exist, he may torture me much more. He knows there is no God. He's proved to thousands of people there is no God. Just a little doubt. Now there's an enlightened being here. He wants to confirm. So he appeared there in the evening. And he asked the same inevitable question, is there God? Gautama looked at the man and said, yes. Once again turmoil started. Morning he said, no God, they were all really happy. In the evening he says, there is God. So what's the game Gautama is trying to play? See, if you believe there is God, or if you believe there is no God, you're in the same boat. You believe something that you do not know.
Here Sadhguru is committing the bad analogy fallacy again. In case you don't know, The false analogy fallacy is when you make an analogy that has absolutely nothing to do with your argument. Which is why whenever you use an analogy, you always have to make sure that it is establishing your arguments. If you use an analogy that has nothing to do with your argument, it's a bad analogy. For example, Sadhguru's argument is that whether you believe in God or not, you do it without knowledge. However, the problem is that his story or the analogy he tells does not establish that. For example, in the story, both the Ram devotee and the Charvaka believed the existence or non-existence of God based on the knowledge of Gautama Buddha. They definitely didn't believe without knowledge. Someone's testimony is a valid form of knowledge, especially if it comes from a reliable source. However, Gautama Buddha turned out to be completely unreliable as a source because he's telling both of them two different things at two different times. He's contradicting himself, which means he's a liar. Therefore, he's unreliable as a witness testimony. Now, if Gautama Buddha was a hadith narrator, we Muslims would have rejected him completely because he would be unreliable. So this analogy does not establish that a theist and a non-theist believe something without knowing. If anything, it establishes that Gautama Buddha is an unreliable, shady character. Because if his argument was that theist and non-theist believe without knowing, then he failed. Because this incident absolutely does not establish that at all. Both of the devotees of Ram and Karvaka came to him for knowledge, and he is the one who is playing games. Then Buddha has the nerve to blame them for believing without knowledge, when in reality they came to him for knowledge. And he's the one who's playing game, and he's the one who's being shady. Also, Sadhguru's whole argument about Ram devotee and the atheist Charvaka being in the same boat is also not true. If you recall, in the story, the Ram devotee came because he had a little doubt. However, the Charvaka came not only because he had a little doubt, he also came because he was scared, because he heard that God has many torture equipments up there.
And all these believers say that he's got all kinds of torture equipment up there. So because I went about proving to everybody that he doesn't exist, he may torture me much more.
So here we can see that the Karvaka was scared of his afterlife. So when it comes to the Ram devotee, he is only having doubts, and when it comes to the Karvaka, he is scared of burning in hellfire for eternity. Tell me, on what planet are they the same thing? If the Ram devotee is wrong and there is no God, he doesn't lose anything. However, if the Karvaka is wrong, he burns in hell for an eternity. So clearly they are not the same thing. Also, this whole story is based on the fallacy of false authority. How the hell did Gautama Buddha know whether God exists or not? He showed no logical reasoning or evidence for his case. So his testimony or statement shouldn't be accepted simply because he is a supposed enlightened being. So both the Ram devotee and Karvaka was wrong in their approach. They committed a fallacy. Regardless, let's continue and see what else this guy has to say.
But when it comes to Shiva, like you say, and I've read that he was self-created, and I often ask you this question, that did he like disappear into thin air, and apparently something like that happened. He couldn't even have biological children with any of the women he was married to. Also, he
At least you can't blame him for the population.
I'm making fun of my own God. This is so funny. And by the way, if Sadhguru was a Muslim, he would be executed right now, on the spot. However, because he's some so-called enlightened guru, they're fine with him mocking Shiva. Some Hindus have no problem killing Muslims for eating meat. So trust me, this is like low-hanging fruit compared to that. By the way, I want to ask any Hindu watching, are you okay with Sadhguru mocking your God? Regardless, let's continue.
We call your spine the center of the universe. We call it Merudanda. That means it's the axis of the universe. What is a universe? Please understand this. Today scientists are admitting it is an endless universe. Forever we've been saying it's an ever-expanding universe. So we said your spine is the axis of the universe. That sounds ridiculous. Even without putting any load, most people's backs are hurting badly. They can't even walk or run or do anything. If this becomes the axis of the universe, what will happen? Why we are saying this is, see, you know there is a universe or you think there is a universe only by your experience, isn't it so? If you did not experience, if you could not see this, if you could not see like this and feel like this, you wouldn't know there is a universe. Only because of your experience there is a universe.
Okay, this is a very materialistic argument. I would like to call this the argument from experience. So let's steelman his position, or let's steelman his argument. Premise 1. Only way you can know something is by experiencing it. Premise 2. We know we can experience the universe. Conclusion. Therefore, since we can experience the universe, we know it exists. Again, remember what I said? In order for an argument to be sound, the premises must be true. So are the premises true? The answer is no. The first premise is absolutely false, because we can easily experience something that is not true. For example, people can dream or have hallucinations. These are also things that people experience. Does that mean that they're true? No, of course not. Same way, we can know something from either using testimony or logic. There's no need to experience something in order to know it. For example, have you ever seen your great-great-great-great-grandmother? No, of course you haven't. However, we know she exists because we can logically conclude that since we exist, therefore our great-great-grandmother also must exist. This is a logical deduction. We can see her, we can also see her picture, maybe or maybe her writings, or we could hear from our grandfather maybe. So even without any experience, we can know something by logic, evidence and testimony. So we don't need to experience our great-great-great-great-grandmother in order to know that she existed. So this is a really bad argument. You don't need experience, you don't need to experience something in order to know it. You can know something without using any experience at all, using logic, rationality, evidence and testimony.
Is it true this body, though you gave food from outside, this body was created from inside? Yes? So whatever is the source of creation must be functioning from within you, isn't it? Is it? So when you don't know what is the nature of the source of creation, you may use in English language. In India we have many words. In this part of the world you may call it God. It's just your explanation for the source of creation, isn't it? Because you have no explanation for the creation, you saying, God made this. We have 1,000 names for that, all right? But fundamentally, we are trying to explain the source of creation. Is it true in your experience, the source of this life's creation is functioning from within you? If it's functioning from within you, if it's somewhere up there and you missed it, it's okay. If it's happening from within you and you missed it, isn't it a tragedy?
Okay, so again, let's steelman his argument again. This is Sadhguru's argument. Premise 1. The source of creation is inside our body. Premise 2. The source of creation is what we call God. Conclusion. Therefore, God is inside our body and we are our own God. Auzubillah minash shaitanir rajim. Now, this is the kind of demonic shirk this guy is teaching. Regardless, he is contradicting himself, because before he said we can't create ourselves.
Obviously, you did not create yourself, that's for sure.
And now, all of a sudden, he's saying that this body was created from inside, meaning we created ourselves?
Is it true, this body, though you gave food from outside, this body was created from inside?
So which one is it? Did we create ourselves, or is it impossible for us to create ourselves? Because they both can be true at the same time. This is a clear-cut contradiction. Here he is committing the fallacy of inconsistency. He is not being consistent. It's clear that this chacha is high on gaja.
গাঁজা আপনারা খাইতে পারেন, গাঁজা আমরা খাই না।
Regardless, let's take a look at his argument. The first premise is obviously false. Source of creation cannot be inside our body, because in order for our bodies to become source of creation, the source of creation need to exist first. However, source of creation cannot exist without our bodies. So our bodies need to be created first. However, our bodies cannot be created first without the source of creation existing first. So the source of creation has to both exist and not exist at the same time, which is a self-contradiction and a paradox. This means that the source of creation has to exist outside of ourselves. People cannot create themselves or be their own gods. It's a complete rubbish, illogical claim. He is also committing begging the question fallacy. His first premise is completely baseless. What makes him think that this is something that's even possible? There is no evidence, reason, or logic that compels us to accept the first premise. It's a completely baseless assumption. And with that, I'm going to end the video. I might make more videos like this in the future. I'm planning on making a video on Osho, who is another cult leader, who also made similar arguments against God. Regardless, thanks for watching. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.